Hey, well, what's up, guys? Welcome back to The Collision. Daniel here to talk about the new Disney film, Mufasa, The Lion King. I have seen it, so let's talk about it. So, as we all know, in recent years, Disney has sort of fully embraced the repetition of the circle of life, as it has endeavored to remake its entire classic canon of animated films. The Lion King kind of was reimagined back in 2019 with the use of some very groundbreaking photorealistic animation. And now, rather than retread the 1998 direct-to-video animated sequel, Lion King 2: Simba's Pride, Disney has chosen to blaze a new trail with an original prequel story at the hands of Academy Award-winning director Barry Jenkins. But unfortunately, the results are just somewhat mixed. Mufasa features some very excellent visual storytelling and I think some very exciting moments, but ultimately it's just let down by very lackluster songs and really a largely joyless tone. And the film is structured kind of with a framing story, a la The Princess Bride, as the wise monkey Rafiki kind of tells Simba's son the underdog tale of Mufasa's rise from a stray cub into become a mighty king. And I do think it is a very clever narrative device that does provide connectivity between the stories, and probably more importantly, the excuse to include fan favorite characters Timon and Pumbaa. At the same time, I think that these sort of frame story interludes are some of the more entertaining moments in the film. Also does serve almost as an unfortunate reminder of just how much more fun the original Lion King was in comparison. I think even the return of some of Hans Zimmer's musical themes, which hey, effectively do tug on some of that old nostalgia, does still kind of overshine anything new from this film. And personally, I just found this film to be more compelling as an original tale than it is as a prequel. Because hey, if you ever wondered where Rafiki got his staff, well, now you know. Or the question of how did Mufasa and Scar have a falling out? Well, it turns out it was just because of a girl. Or even where Scar got his name, with an answer that is just almost laughably forced. But thankfully, I do think the film doesn't go this overboard in trying to set up and answer every possible question about the original story. I think when it is focused on Mufasa's own unique journey, rather than merely foreshadowing Simba's, the movie is compelling, I think even thrilling at times, with some action sequences that I found to be legitimately exciting and tense. And as with the 2019 remake, Mufasa is technically an animated film, although the photorealistic aesthetic really does more closely resemble live action. And I think the animation is once again superb. I think even the most cynical critic of sort of these Disney, reimagining remakes will concede that just the level of, immersive detail achieved is a very impressive feat. Because honestly, the lions at my local zoo almost look cartoonish compared to the ones that are depicted in this movie. And there are some, I think, stunning vistas and landscape visuals. I think director Jenkins is obviously a very gifted visual storyteller. And I do think he taps into sort of the near limitless potential of animation in some interesting and effective ways. But the drawback of the impressive, photorealistic visuals is that the story and the characters also just lose much of their endearing charm. I think the less we think about the nightmare-inducing flounder from the live-action Little Mermaid movie, the better. And without the very distinctive cartoonish features, there were actually several times in this movie where I just wasn't certain which lion was which until another character addressed them by name. I think the realistic appearances and just the inhibited ability for the animals to emote can make it difficult for the audience to connect with the characters. I think can make the story just feel a bit soulless as a result. And kind of during its golden era, Disney was an almost unparalleled hit-making factory of just very infectiously catchy songs. And the original Lion King, I think, boasts some of the best. And despite being responsible arguably for the best tunes of the modern Disney canon in Moana and Encanto, songwriter Lin-Manuel Miranda is just unable to live up to the lofty legacy. In fact, I think the music is probably the weakest part of this entire film, with new songs that are almost shockingly uninspired and forgettable. Even during some of several of these songs, including Bye Bye or I Always Wanted a Brother, my own kids who were in the theater with me actually started to chuckle just at the silliness of it all. And so with dull music and just an animation style that prevents sort of the show-stopping spectacle and choreography to elevate them, the songs just constantly derail this film's momentum and just become a chore. And as a story about a child who internalizes the guilt from the death of his murdered father, The original Lion King obviously navigated some like weighty themes, but I think parents should at least be aware that Mufasa does have a slightly darker tone. And I think like the photorealistic animation definitely adds to the intensity, where it just lacks the cute kind of cartoonish aesthetic to soften like the impact of the bleaker or more violent moments. And comic relief characters like Timon and Pumbaa do contribute kind of some levity throughout this film in the frame story, but their absence from like the main narrative is sorely felt. And instead, like the characters of Rafiki and Zazu do provide some, some humor, some funny moments, but even they don't show up until kind of well into the runtime. So I think like while not inappropriate for children, Mufasa may prove a little bit too frightening, at least for like the younger viewers. As far as kind of the consider things going on the surface of this no language that I caught. For violence, there is sort of some, bloodless lion on lion action in which several lions are killed, although most of the time those deaths happen off screen. Sexuality, nothing for sexuality in this film. Kind of the only other content thing for, parents and Christians to be aware of is, as might be expected if you're, familiar with the original Lion King movies, the story is infused with some like spiritual elements that do seem to reflect both sort of like, Christian and pagan beliefs. Rafiki, the wise kind of shaman monkey, provides plenty of like spiritual nuggets of wisdom along the way, and like there are kind of frequent allusions to the belief that the ancestors live inside of their descendants, which can be taken both in a literal or a figurative sense. And like the plot itself involves sort of the search for this mystical land of Malele, which kind of is frequently described as some sort of like animal heaven. As far as themes, worldview, things going on beneath the surface, I think for younger viewers, there are some wholesome, messages about community and working together. But I do think at a deeper level, the film is attempting to explore kind of more like, weighty spiritual themes. Because like I said, the plot in this movie revolves around characters seeking the land of Malele, which is a Swahili word that means like forever or eternally. And like, the land is described as some sort of like quasi-heavenly paradise. In fact, there is a song titled Malele in this film, which essentially sounds like some sort of like animal gospel song, which has like the opening refrain of beyond the horizon, beyond the last cloud in the sky, there's a place I know, imagine a kingdom, the water flows, the grass is high, it's not a dream, someday we'll go. And Malele is like ultimately revealed to be an actual physical place, like the future home of Pride Rock. At the same time, I do think like director Barry Jenkins also seems to be using it in a more like metaphorical sense, as kind of some sort of like spiritual yearning for the divine. Because Malele is spoken almost in a similar way as like Aslan's country is in the Chronicles of Narnia, C.S. Lewis's own like lion-centric tale. It's like a paradise where characters can be, reunited with loved ones that they become separated from, and like, in order to reach this utopia, the characters must follow kind of steadfastly after the light on the horizon. But of course, like the religious symbolism is not filtered through C.S. Lewis's, biblical worldview, and so some of those like intriguing Christian metaphors eventually do start to fall apart. I think kind of in Mufasa, the emphasis seems to be more on like kind of an internal spiritual discovery and transformation, rather than kind of religious yearnings being directed towards any clear like external deity or spiritual reality. Because as Rafiki tells Mufasa near the end of this film, what matters is not what you were, but what you have become. But in like a very general sense, I think Christians can appreciate the film's almost like Pilgrim's Progress type story of characters that are journeying through the mountains and valleys of life, like literally and metaphorically, to seek the light and kind of discover some sort of spiritual satisfaction and transformation, even if some of like the religious specifics should be measured against the truth of the Bible. So in the end, the rhythms of life may be a circle, but it's just hard not to feel that Disney has audiences heading in a singular downward direction, going from the beloved original animated classic to a very visually impressive but just narratively inferior modern remake, and now to a prequel that, while still very nice to look at, just lacks like the energy or the charm that did make audiences fall in love with these characters in the first place. Still, for audiences willing to just embrace Hakuna Matata and accept Mufasa on its own merit, I do think there is still some enjoyment to be had. I definitely didn't like hate this movie or anything, but in the story, the characters repeatedly wrestle with, what it takes to be a king, whether it's just inherited bloodline or, if one must prove himself worthy. And as a film, Mufasa definitely has the inherited legacy of a, Disney classic that came before it. But at least to me, it just fails to do much to prove itself worthy. But hey, I would love to hear what you think. If you're excited for this movie and maybe you're taking your kids, don't be shy, jump into the comment section, let's have a conversation about it. Could you get you, if you haven't done so, become a collider, subscribe to the channel, got lots of other movie reviews, got our Faith and Pop Culture podcast, got interviews, just other fun stuff. Would love to have you be a part of that. But most of all, guys, thank you for watching, stay safe, have a very Merry Christmas, and continue to collide through a world for Christ.